Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where beauty meant shaving your hairline, whitening your skin with dangerous powders, and surviving winter without losing half your teeth. Medieval Europe had some truly strange beauty standards, and the deeper you travel into candlelit castles, smoky taverns, and frozen village roads, the stranger they become. So settle in beside the fire as we uncover the bizarre ways people chased beauty in the Middle Ages, from noble ladies with impossibly high foreheads to pilgrims who believed holiness could change the face itself. And before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these slow, immersive medieval journeys. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's wander back into the cold and curious world of medieval Europe. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself beneath the dripping shadow of a medieval gatehouse, while cold river mist curls around your boots and settles into the folds of your cloak like a particularly clingy ghost. The stone walls above you sweat with rainwater older than your grandfather's grandfather, and somewhere overhead a watchman coughs into the darkness before striking his spear against the parapet. The sound echoes through the dusk along with distant monastery bells counting the hour in slow, bronze groans. Beneath your feet, the road has dissolved into a thick brown soup of mud, horse dung, and crushed straw. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. A cartwheel creaks nearby. Wet horses breathe steam into the freezing air. Smoke leaks from crooked chimneys beyond the walls, carrying the smell of peat fires, boiled onions, damp wool, and somebody's slightly overconfident eel stew. You tighten your cloak against the wind and immediately realize something uncomfortable. You probably would not last a week out here without complaining about your back, your feet, or the alarming absence of proper mattresses. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in tonight, feel free to comment your location and local time. Somewhere out there, another tired traveler may be listening beside their own midnight window. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The guards finally allow you through the gate after examining you with the enthusiasm of men who have spent 12 hours standing in freezing drizzle. One of them carried an iron lantern, whose weak flame throws strange gold shapes across the stone tunnel beneath the gatehouse. Rushes lie scattered underfoot to soak up mud and spilled ale, though judging by the smell, they have not been changed recently. Some swear gatehouse rushes can survive 3 winters before surrendering completely. Inside the town walls, evening settles softly over crooked lanes and timber-framed houses leaning toward one another like gossiping relatives. Candlelight glows behind stretched parchment windows. Dogs nose through puddles. Somewhere nearby, a cooper hammers the last iron band onto a barrel before darkness closes the market for the night, and almost immediately, you begin noticing the faces. Not merely faces, really, but faces arranged carefully according to rules you do not yet understand. A noblewoman passes in a covered litter carried by servants splashing through mud. Her skin appears almost ghostly white in the torchlight. Powder dust clings to her cheeks and throat. Her forehead rises high and smooth beneath a jeweled veil, so high that for one alarming moment you wonder whether she has misplaced half her hair. Yet nobody stares in surprise. In fact, nearby apprentices glance toward her with quiet admiration. A baker's wife standing under her doorway instinctively touches her own brow after the litter passes, as though measuring herself against that pale, floating face. You continue deeper into town beneath dangling shop signs creaking in the wind. A barber's striped basin hangs outside one doorway. Beside it, bundles of herbs dry beneath the eaves: rosemary, sage, tansy, lavender. Their scents drift through the damp air whenever the wind changes direction. Near the market square, a group of young women crowd around a polished metal mirror no larger than a dinner plate. Real glass mirrors are rare and costly here, so most people rely on cloudy metal reflections that transform every face into something slightly mythical. One girl pinches her cheeks red, another plucks hairs from her brow with thread, a third complains softly that her skin has darkened after harvest work. No one can quite agree whether pale skin first became fashionable because nobles avoided field labour, or because people simply enjoyed looking as though sunlight itself feared them. Probably both. A monk once wrote that the ideal woman should resemble a lily untouched by weather, though judging from the actual weather outside tonight, lilies would not survive long either. You pass beneath the shadow of a church tower where candles flicker, before painted saints blackened by smoke. An old woman crouches near the entrance selling tiny cloth charms meant to preserve beauty. She claims one contains a saint's eyelash. Even now, it is hard to tell whether anyone truly believes her, or whether medieval people simply appreciate confident marketing. You buy nothing, though she still presses dried lavender into your hand against ugliness and bad dreams. The square ahead slowly empties as merchants cover their stalls with waxed cloth. Fishmongers toss dirty water into gutters. A butcher scrapes blood from his chopping block while cats gather hopefully around his boots. Lanterns sway above muddy puddles that reflect the moon in broken silver streaks. Near the fountain, a travelling storyteller performs for a shrinking crowd despite the cold. He speaks of queens whose beauty launched wars and noble ladies who bathed in milk mixed with crushed flowers. One listener mutters that bathing too often weakens the body and invites illness through open pores. This, strangely enough, is considered reasonable. Many people here distrust frequent bathing with impressive dedication. Cleanliness exists in a complicated relationship with medicine, religion, superstition, and sheer inconvenience. Linen undergarments are changed more often than full body washing occurs. Herbs are burned to sweeten rooms. Perfumes mask sweat. Hands are rinsed in bowls before meals, while entire bodies may go weeks without seeing a proper tub. Frankly, the perfumes are fighting a heroic losing battle. You drift toward an alehouse whose windows glow warm against the darkening street. Inside, the air thickens instantly with smoke, yeast, wet wool, and roasted onions. Men and women huddle around long wooden tables while dogs sleep beneath benches beside scattered rushes. Beeswax candles sputter against soot-black rafters overhead. You settle near the hearth where heat finally begins creeping back into your hands. Across the room sits a merchant's daughter with hair hidden beneath an elaborate veil pinned by tiny brass combs. Only a narrow oval of her face remains visible. The concealment somehow draws more attention rather than less. A young clerk nearby keeps pretending not to look at her, while very obviously looking at her. Medieval romance, you discover, relies heavily on strategic staring from across smoky rooms. The innkeeper sets down a trencher of coarse bread beside a steaming bowl of pottage thick with cabbage and barley. You eat slowly while rain taps against shutters outside. At the next table, two women discuss beauty remedies with deadly seriousness. One swears goose fat softens wrinkles. The other insists crushed strawberries whiten teeth. A third claims sleeping beside rosemary improves complexion, because the herb frightens evil spirits away during dreams. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the rosemary helps the skin or merely improves the smell of the sleeper. Probably both again. As the fire settles lower into glowing red coals, you begin to notice another pattern beneath all these strange ideals. Beauty here is never merely beauty. Pale skin means wealth. Soft hands mean freedom from labour. Elaborate veils mean status. Perfume means access to costly spices and oils carried across dangerous roads. Faces become tiny billboards advertising survival. Outside, monastery bells ring once more through the misty dark while wind rattles the shutters. Somewhere beyond the walls, travellers still struggle through muddy roads beneath cold stars. But here inside the alehouse, warmth gathers softly around the hearth, around the murmuring voices, around the flickering candlelight reflected in cloudy cups of ale. And as you sit listening to the storm and the endless quiet fascination medieval people have with one another's faces, the strange world around you begins slowly, sleepily, to unfold. The fire burns low by the time you leave the alehouse, though the warmth clings faintly to your cloak as you step back into the wet night. Rain has softened into drifting mist, and the town now moves with that quieter rhythm, belonging only to late medieval evenings, when shutters close one by one and the streets belong mostly to cats, watchmen, and people with secrets. You follow a narrow lane uphill toward the manor quarter, where wealth gathers behind thicker walls and cleaner stone. The mud here grows slightly less aggressive beneath your boots, which feels like a luxury worth commemorating in song. Lanterns hang beside oak doors banded with black iron, their flames trembling in glass that fogs from the cold. Ahead, a servant empties rushes from an upper window into the gutter below. The old reeds fall with a wet slap beside your feet, carrying traces of lavender, ash, spilled wine, and many months of boots. Medieval housekeeping, you notice, often involves simply throwing unpleasant things into the street and trusting rain to negotiate with them afterward. A bell sounds from somewhere deeper within the manor district. Not the heavy bronze call of a monastery this time, but a smaller household bell marking the evening meal. The sound drifts through curtained windows glowing gold against the dark. You pause beside one such window almost without meaning to. Inside, beneath the soft light of beeswax candles, noble women sit before polished silver mirrors while servants move carefully around them carrying combs, cloths, and little ceramic jars. The scene feels dreamlike through the wavering glass. Fur-lined cloaks hang drying near the hearth. A lapdog sleeps beneath a carved chair. Someone laughs softly while another woman lifts a hand to her forehead with almost religious concentration. And now, at last, you begin understanding the mystery of the missing hair. The fashion among noble women here favours extraordinarily high foreheads. Hairlines are plucked or shaved several fingers back to create a broad, pale brow, believed to signal refinement, gentleness, and aristocratic grace. Eyebrows, meanwhile, are often thinned nearly to disappearance. The effect is strangely elegant once your eyes adjust to it, though at first glance everyone appears mildly surprised at all times. A servant girl carefully holds a candle while her mistress sits motionless in a carved oak chair. Tiny tweezers glint in the firelight as loose hairs are removed one by one from the woman's brow. The process looks uncomfortable enough to inspire spiritual reflection. Some swear the ideal first appeared in imitation of holy paintings, where saints possessed smooth, luminous faces untouched by ordinary burdens. Others insist it began at royal courts, where fashion spreads faster than plague and with almost as much mercy. No one can quite agree whether medieval beauty standards emerge from devotion, vanity, boredom, or simply rich people competing creatively against one another. Most likely all four. You continue along the lane until music drifts from an open doorway nearby. A harp plays softly somewhere inside while servants carry steaming platters through the entrance hall. One glances suspiciously at you before deciding you look too tired to steal anything heavier than bread. Inside the manor, warmth presses against your face like a living thing. The hall smells of rosemary smoke, polished wood, beeswax, and roasted game. Tapestries hang along stone walls depicting saints, hunts, and battles whose participants all possess remarkably fashionable foreheads. At the far end of the hall sits the lady of the household beneath a canopy embroidered with gold thread. Her gown pools around her like dark river water. Pearls gleam along the edge of her veil. Her face shines pale in candlelight, untouched by sun or wind or anything resembling practical labour. Two younger women sit beside her while an older attendant lectures them quietly about posture. A noble neck must move like a swan, she says. Unfortunately, one girl immediately sneezes into her sleeve hard enough to resemble an injured goose. You lower your eyes to hide a smile. Nearby servants prepare scented water for washing hands before supper. The bowl contains floating herbs and slices of lemon imported at ridiculous expense from warmer lands. Guests dip fingers politely while discussing weather, trade, and rumours from court. One knight compliments another man's complexion with startling seriousness. You have avoided the winter redness admirably. Goose grease, the man replies. There is a respectful silence after this, as though he has revealed state secrets. You take a place near the edge of the hall where travellers and lesser retainers are permitted to warm themselves. A servant offers you ale and dark bread still warm from the oven. Beyond the tall windows, wind rattles bare branches against stone. The noblemen continue their rituals near the hearth. One rubs crushed violets mixed with oil along her wrists. Another powders her face lightly with pale dust. Small boxes of cosmetics sit open upon the table beside combs carved from bone and little cloth packets filled with herbs. Lead powder, though nobody here fully understands the danger, remains popular among the wealthy because it whitens skin beautifully. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the faint sickness haunting certain noble faces comes from winter illness, poor diet, or years spent painting poison onto their cheeks. Beauty, you begin realizing, often demands small negotiations with common sense. A thin young page enters carrying a polished hand mirror framed in silver. The lady of the manor studies herself silently for several long moments, while the room hums with distant conversation and crackling firewood. Then she speaks. Too much colour. A servant immediately blots her cheeks with linen. The correction is nearly invisible to you, but everyone nearby nods with solemn approval. Medieval nobility approaches appearance with the same intensity monks devote to illuminated manuscripts. Every fold of fabric matters. Every ribbon speaks. Every gesture quietly announces rank. At supper, trenchers of bread serve as plates beneath roasted capons, onions cooked in butter, smoked fish, and thick pottage rich with leeks. You eat slowly while musicians play near the fire. Candlelight flickers across silver cups and damp wool cloaks drying beside the hearthstones. A greyhound wanders beneath the tables accepting scraps with the dignity of a minor lord collecting taxes. Across from you, an elderly woman tells a younger servant never to sleep facing moonlight if she wishes to preserve her complexion. Supposedly the moon steals colour from careless faces during winter nights. Some swear this explains why millers grow pale. Others suspect flour may contribute. The hall gradually softens into drowsy warmth as wine flows and conversation slows. Yet beneath all the comfort runs constant awareness of appearance. Noble women sit carefully upright even while tired. Men smooth beards before speaking, sleeves hide rough hands, veils conceal imperfections. Everyone here performs themselves endlessly. You notice, too, how beauty belongs less to youth than control. Control over diet, control over labour, control over sunlight, weather, clothing, scent, and time itself. The pale faces glowing near the fire are not merely admired because they are lovely. They are admired because they prove distance from hardship. Outside these walls, peasants bend through freezing fields beneath rain and smoke and hunger. Inside, people pluck their hairlines by candlelight and discuss ideal neck posture. Human history, you reflect quietly, has always contained this particular contrast. As midnight nears, servants extinguish several candles one by one. Shadows lengthen along the rafters. Somewhere deeper in the manor, a woman laughs softly before a door closes. The harp music fades. You settle nearer the fire with your cloak wrapped tight around your shoulders, while wind sighs faintly beyond the shutters. And before sleep finally begins tugging at the edges of your thoughts, you catch one last glimpse of the lady's pale face reflected dimly in her silver mirror, floating there like a moon above the dark hall, delicate and distant and shaped entirely by the strange dreams of her age. Morning arrives slowly beneath a ceiling of low grey clouds and drifting chimney smoke. You wake stiff from the manor hall bench with one arm entirely numb and a faint imprint of woven wool pressed across your cheek. Nearby, embers glow softly beneath white ash, while servants already move through the hall, scattering fresh rushes across the stone floor. The new reeds smell sharp and green, briefly overpowering the usual mixture of smoke, wet dog, and old ale. A monastery bell tolls somewhere beyond the walls, heavy and patient in the cold dawn air. The noble household wakes carefully. Servants carry steaming basins through corridors. Doors creak open. Boots strike stone. Somewhere above you, a woman complains that damp weather ruins her complexion, which feels optimistic considering the weather appears committed to ruining nearly everything else as well. You pull your cloak tighter and step outside into the waking town. Morning market preparations have already begun in the square below. Merchants raise striped awnings while apprentices haul crates through puddles. Geese protest loudly from wicker cages. A fishwife arranges silver river trout across crushed ice with the solemn concentration of a jeweller displaying gems. The market smells wonderfully alive. Fresh bread steams from bakery shutters, smoke rises from cook fires, wet wool cloaks brush past you carrying traces of rain and sheep lanolin. Somewhere nearby, somebody fries onions in goose fat, producing the kind of scent that convinces hungry travellers to forgive civilization for many things. You wander slowly among the stalls while merchants shout prices over the noise of carts and livestock. Yet woven through the ordinary business of food and cloth and iron tools runs another thriving trade entirely. Beauty. A woman beneath a faded green canopy sells tiny ceramic jars of face cream mixed from almond oil, rose water, and beeswax. Beside her hang bundles of dried herbs promising clearer skin, sweeter breath, thicker hair, and protection against blemishes supposedly caused by malicious spirits. One particularly alarming powder claims to restore youthful bloom in 3 nights. The seller refuses to explain what happens on the 4th night. Across the lane, an old physician's widow displays soap scented with lavender and mint, alongside little cloth sachets filled with crushed flowers. Customers lift them carefully to their noses while discussing winter dryness and cracked skin. You pause at a stall crowded with polished bronze mirrors imported at considerable expense from southern lands. Their reflections shimmer softly and distort every face just enough to encourage optimism. A young apprentice studies himself anxiously in one mirror while smoothing his hair flat with spit. Medieval grooming, you notice, relies heavily on determination and bodily fluids. Beside him, two village women examine strings of glass beads while speaking quietly about a local girl soon to marry a wool merchant. One says the bride has good pale wrists. The other replies that her teeth are slightly unfortunate. There follows a long and thoughtful silence. Beauty here is discussed less like art and more like livestock evaluation. You continue deeper into the market where travellers from distant regions gather around the fountain. A fur trader from the north wears a beard braided with tiny metal rings. A merchant woman from warmer southern ports displays embroidered veils dyed deep blue and crimson. Pilgrims pass carrying staffs decorated with little lead badges shaped like saints. Everywhere you look, appearance announces origin, wealth, occupation, and ambition. Near the church steps, a wandering tooth drawer has gathered a crowd. His table displays terrifying iron instruments beside bottles of cloudy liquid. He loudly promises stronger teeth, fresher breath, and relief from facial swelling. A child asks whether the procedure hurts. The man replies, "Only briefly." This answer inspires absolutely no confidence. Still, several customers linger nearby examining little packets of powdered herbs meant for whitening teeth. Crushed sage, charcoal, salt, and mint appear especially popular. Some swear rubbing urine upon the teeth also helps preserve them, though thankfully nobody nearby demonstrates. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the treatment improves the teeth or merely frightens everyone into standing farther away. You leave quickly before anyone offers samples. Rain begins falling again, not heavily, but steadily enough to silver the rooftops and turn cloaks dark with moisture. Merchants pull canvas lower over their stalls. You duck beneath the overhang of a spice seller's booth where warm scents of cinnamon, clove, pepper, and dried orange peel drift through the damp air. The spice merchant himself possesses astonishingly smooth skin for an older man. When a customer compliments him, he leans forward confidentially. "Egg whites," he says. "On the face, where else would I put them?" Fair enough. A cluster of women nearby discuss recipes for skin lightening. Vinegar mixed with lemon juice, crushed lilies steeped in goat milk, powdered pearl if one happens to possess the income of a minor kingdom. Pale skin remains the great obsession here. Farmers darkened by sun and weather are admired for strength perhaps, but not elegance. To appear untouched by labour is the dream, and yet the irony follows you everywhere. The women working hardest to achieve aristocratic beauty often labour endlessly at beauty itself, mixing creams, avoiding sunlight, maintaining garments, arranging veils, plucking hair, preserving fabrics from smoke and rain. Even leisure requires effort. You stop beneath the church arcade where beggars huddle from the rain wrapped in patch blankets. One old man wears a silver pilgrim badge pinned proudly to his cloak. Another woman covers half her face with linen scarred from an old illness, perhaps pox or fever. Scars change everything here. A smooth face suggests luck, health, survival. Disease marks people visibly in a world where illness walks openly through every season. Beauty standards become tangled with fear of sickness itself. No one can quite agree whether medieval people admire beauty because life feels uncertain, or whether uncertainty merely sharpens the desire for beautiful things. Perhaps both, again. Inside the church, candles flicker before painted saints, while worshippers murmur prayers into cold air smelling of incense and damp stone. You sit quietly near the back watching townspeople arrive one by one. a wealthy merchant's wife kneels carefully so her elaborate veil does not crush beneath her. A baker's daughter smooths cracked hands against her apron before crossing herself. An old widow touches a tiny mirror hanging from her belt, perhaps checking her face before prayer, perhaps remembering youth, perhaps simply reassuring herself she still exists beneath all these layers of wool and winter and time. Even here, beauty follows people into sacred spaces. A monk passes carrying incense through the dim nave. The smoke curls upward around candlelight in pale, twisting ribbons. Somewhere overhead, rain taps softly against the roof lead. You realize then that medieval beauty is rarely about individual expression in the modern sense. It is collective, symbolic, coded. Faces become signals understood instantly by everyone around them. High foreheads speak of refinement. White hands speak of privilege. Thick hair suggests fertility. Clear skin hints at health and divine favor. Strong teeth imply survival through winters harsh enough to humble kings. Outside the church, the market continues roaring softly through the rain. Carts creak, bells ring, merchants argue, dogs bark at passing geese with admirable confidence despite overwhelming numerical disadvantage. You step back into the square carrying the lingering smell of incense in your cloak, while cold drizzle settles once more onto the town. And as the strange rhythms of medieval life move steadily around you, practical and superstitious, harsh and oddly tender all at once, the market itself begins feeling less like a place of trade and more like a great living mirror where every person quietly measures themselves against everyone else. By afternoon, the rain finally weakens into a silver mist drifting above the rooftops, and the market square exhales the weary relief of people who have spent half the day damp. You leave behind the shouting merchants and muddy carts, climbing instead toward the monastery perched along the northern wall of the town. Its stone towers rise pale against the clouds. A narrow road winds upward past gardens enclosed by low walls where monks grow onions, sage, fennel, and bitter medicinal herbs. Bare apple trees creak softly in the wind. Water drips from gutters shaped like snarling beasts whose stone mouths never quite succeed in frightening the crows. You pass beneath the abbey gate while a lay brother sweeps mud from the threshold, with the hopeless persistence of a man attempting to negotiate with the sea. The monastery smells immediately different from the town below. Cooler, cleaner, perhaps, beeswax, parchment, damp stone, and wood smoke mingle with the faint, sharp scent of ink. Bells echo softly through cloisters where hooded figures move in near silence beneath covered walkways. For a moment the whole place feels removed from ordinary life entirely, as though time itself walks slower here. Then a monk slips on wet moss near the well and mutters something very unmonastic under his breath. So perhaps not entirely removed. A guest brother welcomes you into the monastery hospice where travellers may sleep in exchange for modest donations or useful gossip. He offers dark bread, onion pottage, and watered ale before leading you into a long chamber lined with narrow wooden beds. Wool blankets lie folded neatly atop each one. A small fire burns near the far wall beneath a soot-dark chimney. Iron hooks hold drying cloaks beside bunches of rosemary hung to sweeten the air. Against sickness, the monk explains. You suspect the rosemary faces an impossible task but admire its courage. As evening approaches, you wander quietly through the cloister garden while bells mark the hour for prayer. Monks cross the courtyard in black robes, whispering Latin beneath their breath. Somewhere nearby, geese honk with startling aggression at absolutely nothing. No one can quite agree whether monastery geese guard holy ground from evil spirits or simply dislike humanity on principle. Inside the scriptorium, candles already glow despite the lingering daylight. Here the monks copy manuscripts beside tall windows clouded with rain. Quills scratch softly against parchment while tiny knives scrape mistakes from vellum. The room smells of ink and concentration. You pause beside one elderly scribe whose fingers are permanently stained dark brown from decades of work. Illuminated pages lie open before him, painted with saints, queens, vines, and delicate golden halos. And there again you notice the faces. The holy women in these manuscripts possess pale, smooth skin, tiny mouths, long fingers, and impossibly serene expressions. Their foreheads rise broad beneath veils edged with gold leaf. Even the Virgin herself appears fashionably plucked. The scribe notices your interest. Beauty reflects order, he says quietly. A disciplined face reflects a disciplined soul. You glance toward another manuscript depicting demons dragging sinners into hell. The demons, interestingly, possess magnificent hair. The monk either misses your observation or wisely chooses not to address it. As candles flicker across the parchment, he explains how many learned men believe outward appearance reveals inward character. Smooth skin suggests purity. Symmetry suggests divine harmony. Bright eyes indicate health and intelligence. Certain physicians even argue that temperament shapes the face itself. Melancholy people supposedly grow thin and pale. Angry people become coarse. Lustful people develop restless eyes. Meanwhile, you personally suspect most medieval people simply look exhausted because they are alive in the Middle Ages. Still, the belief runs deep. Another monk joins the conversation carrying a tray of pigments ground from minerals and plants. He sets down little dishes of crushed lapis, red ochre, charcoal, and powdered green earth. Vanity, he says dryly, occupies much of human thought, and monasteries never concern themselves with appearances, you ask. The first monk snorts softly enough to risk minor spiritual consequences. Even monasteries are not free from beauty. Abbeys compete through magnificent churches, jewelled reliquaries, embroidered vestments, and illuminated books glowing with shell gold. Holiness itself often arrives wrapped in visual splendour. Some swear beautiful objects honour God. Others quietly suspect humans simply enjoy beautiful things and invent holy reasons afterward. Outside the scriptorium, dusk settles blue and cold over the cloisters. Supper bells ring through the abbey. You follow the monks into the refectory where long wooden tables stretch beneath smoke-black beams. Tonight's meal consists of lentil pottage, coarse bread, smoked fish, and weak ale served in pottery cups. A young novice reads scripture aloud while everyone eats in silence except for chewing, coughing, and one unfortunate sneeze that echoes like cannon fire through the hall. Monastic silence, you discover, becomes considerably less mystical during cold season. Across from you sits a thin monk with remarkably smooth skin despite the winter weather. He catches you noticing and explains, somewhat reluctantly, that he washes daily with rosewater because cleanliness assists contemplation. A heavier monk nearby mutters that contemplation seems to require an expensive amount of roses. The younger monk ignores him with practiced dignity. As supper ends, candles burn lower while darkness pools softly beyond the narrow windows. Snow threatens in the clouds now, though rain still taps faintly against the glass. You help carry bowls toward the kitchens where steam fogs the air around huge iron pots. Lay brothers scrub tables with sand and vinegar. One woman stirring soup explains that noble ladies sometimes send monasteries written requests for remedies improving complexion or preserving youth. Mostly herbs, she says, sometimes prayers, occasionally both. She lowers her voice. One countess paid generously for saint's bone dust to mix into face cream. Did it work? Well, the cook replies, she remained wealthy. Which, in fairness, he solves many problems. Later, near the warming fire in the guest chamber, an elderly pilgrim tells stories while travellers dry socks and cloaks upon wooden racks. He claims women in certain courts sleep upright to preserve elaborate hairstyles for several days at a time. A merchant insists this cannot possibly be true. The pilgrim shrugs. Neither is balancing roasted peacocks atop pies, yet nobles continue surprising us. Outside, wind moans softly around the monastery walls while bells toll the final prayers of evening. One by one the travellers settle beneath blankets. Candles shrink into trembling pools of wax. Before sleeping, you notice a tiny polished mirror hanging beside one monk's bed. Nothing grand, just a little disk of silver reflecting firelight. Even here, among vows and prayers and cold stone discipline, people still look at themselves before sleeping. Perhaps they always will. You lie back beneath rough wool blankets, listening to distant chanting echo through the abbey halls. Smoke drifts lazily along the rafters overhead. Somewhere beyond the walls, the town continues dreaming its strange dreams of beauty and rank and pale, graceful faces. And here in the monastery darkness, surrounded by ink-stained scribes and whispering prayers, you begin to understand that medieval beauty is not merely fashion. It is morality. It is class. It is health, fear, faith, survival, and longing all braided together beneath candlelight. The bells ring once more through the cold night air. Then slowly, softly, the monastery settles into silence. You wake before dawn to the sound of monastery bells rolling through darkness like distant thunder beneath the earth. For several long moments you lie still beneath rough wool blankets while cold air nips at your nose and smoke drifts lazily above the rafters. Somewhere nearby, a monk coughs with the determination of a man trying to expel his entire soul before breakfast. The guest chamber stirs slowly around you. Travellers groan softly, boots scrape against stone. Someone mutters a prayer after discovering their socks are still damp from yesterday's rain. A candle flickers near the doorway, painting the room in sleepy gold. You rise reluctantly and warm stiff hands above the fire while a lay brother distributes cups of thin ale and dark bread spread with onion fat. Outside the narrow window, the sky remains blue-black beneath low clouds, and frost silvers the monastery garden paths. The day ahead smells of wood smoke and cold mud. After thanking the brothers for their hospitality, you leave the abbey and descend toward the waking town once more. Dawn creeps slowly across rooftops, while market carts rumble through the gates and chimney smoke thickens above the streets. You follow the smell of frying onions and fresh ale toward a tavern already awake before sunrise, which tells you nearly everything you need to know about taverns. Inside, warmth crashes over you immediately. The room glows with firelight reflecting off damp beams blackened by generations of smoke. Rushes crunch beneath boots. A fat orange cat sleeps directly beside the hearth, with the self-confidence of a creature paying absolutely no taxes. Men crowd around long tables eating coarse bread dipped into steaming pottage before beginning the day's labour. Teamsters, masons, drovers, washerwomen, ferrymen, ordinary people whose faces carry windburn, scars, crooked noses, broken teeth, and the permanent exhaustion of surviving medieval winters. And yet here, among smoke and ale and muddy cloaks, beauty looks very different from the pale, silent elegance of noble halls. A serving woman moves through the room carrying heavy pitchers with easy strength in her arms. Her cheeks glow bright red from heat and cold. Strands of dark hair escape beneath her linen veil. Several men watch her pass with unmistakable admiration. Not despite her healthy appearance. Because of it. At another table, two farmers praise a blacksmith's daughter for being sturdy as an oak root, and possessing good strong hips for childbearing. One man compliments a washerwoman's thick braid, while another boasts proudly that his wife still has nearly all her teeth after 6 children and 3 harsh winters. This apparently unqualifies as romance. You settle near the hearth with a bowl of oat pottage while listening quietly. Among peasants and townsfolk, beauty favours warmth, health, fertility, and practicality. Pale skin still carries status, yes, but too much delicacy appears suspicious here. Hands should show work, though not weakness. Faces should carry colour. Strong limbs matter more than graceful posture learned beside court musicians. A milkmaid enters stamping frost from her boots. Her face shines from cold wind and early labour. One old man watching her nods approvingly. "Healthy girl," he says. Nobody mentions foreheads. The tavern keeper's wife soon joins your table carrying fresh bread still warm from the oven. Her sleeves are rolled to the elbows, exposing flour-covered arms and red wrists roughened by work. "You look half frozen," she says. You admit this may be accurate. She pours ale generously anyway. Behind the counter hangs bunches of garlic, sage, and dried lavender beside iron cooking pots blackened with soot. Smoke curls upward through rafters where years of grease and fire have turned the beams nearly midnight black. The tavern itself feels alive in a different way than the manor, louder, messier, more honest perhaps. A fiddler near the fire tunes his instrument while labourers discuss weather and taxes. One woman complains about cracked hands from winter washing. Another recommends goose grease mixed with honey. A third insists sleeping with onions beneath the bed preserves youthful skin. No one can quite agree whether onions cure illness, prevent wrinkles, or simply punish nearby sleepers equally. At the neighbouring table sits a cooper with arms like tree branches and a beard full of sawdust. He proudly explains that women prefer men with broad shoulders, because they look capable of surviving things. Considering the century, this is genuinely useful. Nearby, a seamstress laughs while teasing him about his missing tooth. Adds character, the cooper insists. "It adds wind," she replies. The entire table erupts in sleepy laughter. Here beauty standards bend more easily around personality and familiarity. People admire resilience because resilience keeps families alive. A warm smile matters, a strong back matters. Good health matters enormously. And scent, surprisingly, matters too. Despite common jokes about medieval smells, many deserved people still value cleanliness whenever possible. Hands are washed before meals. Linen shifts absorb sweat beneath wool garments. Herbs are tucked into sleeves and belts. Rosemary water rinses hair. Mint freshens breath. The standards differ by class, but the desire to appear attractive exists everywhere. A young woman near the fire carefully smooths her apron before a carpenter sits beside her. He offers roasted chestnuts wrapped in cloth. She accepts with a shy smile while pretending not to notice him staring. Medieval flirting continues relying heavily on pretending not to flirt. The fiddler finally begins playing. Soft music winds through the tavern beneath murmuring conversation and crackling logs. Outside, carts rattle over frozen mud while the town fully wakes beyond the shutters. You notice scars more now. A burn mark across one cook's wrist. Pox marks faintly dimpling a merchant's cheeks. A bent nose healed crooked after some forgotten accident. In this world, bodies record survival openly, illness, childbirth, hunger, labour, winters, accidents, everything leaves traces. Perhaps that is why ordinary people admire vitality more than perfection. Perfection feels fragile, too polished, too distant from real life. Even now, it is hard to tell whether peasants secretly envy noble beauty or quietly find it ridiculous. Likely both again. As morning stretches onward, steam thickens the tavern windows until the outside world blurs into pale shapes moving through fog. The tavern keeper serves smoked fish with mustard, while muttering darkly about rising grain prices. Near the hearth, an old woman begins telling fortunes using apple peels dropped into ale. She claims the shapes reveal future husbands. A young stable boy asks whether the peel can reveal future horses instead. She studies him for a long moment. Only if you marry one. The stable boy decides perhaps fortune-telling is not for him. You finish your meal slowly while warmth settles pleasantly into your bones. Around you, ordinary medieval life hums onward through smoke and laughter, and aching hands wrapped around hot cups. And here, away from noble mirrors and monastery manuscripts, beauty feels softer somehow, less ceremonial, less fragile. A bright laugh. Strong teeth. Warm cheeks after winter wind. Hair smelling faintly of rosemary smoke. Hands capable of kneading bread, carrying wood, soothing fevers, holding children. Not idealized saints floating above candlelight. Simply people surviving together through another cold season. Outside, the bells ring once more across the town while pale daylight spreads over frost-covered roofs. And as you step back into the winter morning carrying the smell of ale and wood smoke in your cloak, you realize the strange beauty standards of medieval Europe are never truly singular. Every hall, every village, every firelit room quietly invents its own. By late afternoon, the sky hangs low and white above the town, heavy with the promise of snow that never quite arrives. The streets glisten from melted frost, while smoke drifts lazily from chimneys into the dimming air. You spend the day wandering slowly through narrow lanes where washerwomen beat linen beside steaming vats, and apprentices haul firewood through mud hardened at the edges with ice. Everywhere winter presses close. Fur-lined cloaks appear in greater numbers now. Hoods rise against the wind. Faces redden beneath the cold. Even the dogs move with a kind of resigned determination, as though medieval winters have personally offended them for generations. Toward evening, church bells begin ringing longer than usual. A wedding? People drift toward the parish church carrying lanterns through the gathering dusk. You follow almost instinctively, drawn by the warm gold glow spilling from open doors and the murmur of excited voices. Inside, the church feels transformed. Candles burn everywhere along stone ledges, before painted saints, beside the altar where wax drips slowly like pale honey. Evergreen branches hang above the nave, filling the air with sharp pine scent, mixed with incense and damp wool cloaks drying in the heat of crowded bodies. Villagers gather shoulder to shoulder beneath the arches while snow-coloured breath still curls faintly from their mouths. At the centre of it all stands the bride. Or rather, sits the bride. Because at this precise moment 3 women are still adjusting her clothing with the concentrated intensity of soldiers preparing siege equipment. You remain near the back watching quietly as candlelight trembles across embroidered sleeves and polished buckles. The bride's gown is not dazzling by royal standards, but compared to ordinary village clothing it appears wonderfully rich. Deep blue wool trimmed with rabbit fur at the cuffs, carefully stitched linen beneath, and a narrow girdle decorated with tiny brass fittings. Her veil has been pinned so tightly you suspect she may never turn her head naturally again. A young cousin carefully smooths stray hairs beneath the linen covering, while another woman dabs rosewater at the bride's wrists and throat. The scent drifts softly through the air. The bride herself looks pale with nerves. One older woman notices and immediately presses honeyed wine into her hands. "Drink," she whispers. Marriage is easier blurred slightly around the edges. Practical advice survives every century. You edge closer while guests continue arriving through the church doors in bursts of cold air. boots scrape against rushes scattered along the floor. Children whisper excitedly near the font until silenced by sharp maternal glances. The bride's mother now produces a tiny polished mirror from her sleeve. The bride studies herself briefly in the cloudy reflection. Beauty tonight matters intensely. Not merely because weddings celebrate romance, though romance certainly lingers here beneath the candlelight, but because marriage transforms status, alliances, survival itself. A bride's appearance reflects her family's honour, prosperity, and care. Clear skin suggests health. Well-kept hair suggests discipline. Good clothing suggests stability. And a calm, graceful expression suggests she is not currently considering escape through the nearest side door. Though judging from her eyes, the thought may have crossed her mind. Some swear brides should wear blue for purity and heavenly favour. Others insist green brings fertility. A few whisper that pearls invite tears during marriage, and therefore must be avoided. No one can quite agree whether medieval wedding customs originate from faith, superstition, or generations of anxious relatives inventing rules during stressful evenings. The groom waits near the altar wearing his finest wool tunic brushed carefully clean of straw and horsehair. His boots have actually been polished, his beard trimmed. Someone has even tied a ribbon around his sleeve. He keeps staring toward the bride with an expression hovering between awe and absolute terror. Fairly understandable. Beside you, two elderly women quietly evaluate the bride with professional seriousness. Good complexion, one murmurs. A little thin, but healthy eyes. Strong hair, small hands. The assessment continues like merchants inspecting a valuable horse. Yet beneath the scrutiny lies genuine tenderness too. Women straighten the bride's sleeves gently. Friends squeeze her hands. A younger sister keeps smiling at her through watery eyes. The church bells finally fall silent. Candles flicker against painted saints blackened by centuries of smoke, while the priest begins the ceremony in Latin most villagers only partially understand. Stillness settles across the nave, broken only by crackling candles and distant winter wind beyond the stone walls. The bride and groom join hands. You notice immediately how carefully everyone watches them. Posture matters, expression matters. The lowering of eyes, the lifting of the chin, the modest arrangement of clothing, all these tiny gestures carry meaning in medieval life. Beauty here is performance as much as appearance. The bride lowers her gaze demurely at exactly the proper moments. The groom stands straight despite obvious nerves. Their families observe with quiet relief as everything proceeds according to custom. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people truly believe beauty reflects virtue, or whether centuries of repetition simply make the connection feel natural. Perhaps eventually those become the same thing. After the vows, celebration spills outward into the churchyard beneath torchlight and drifting mist. Musicians tune fiddles while servants carry baskets of bread and smoked fish toward the feast hall nearby. Snow finally begins falling. Only lightly at first, tiny flakes drifting through torch smoke and settling upon cloaks and veils. The bride laughs softly when snow lands across her sleeve. Someone nearby immediately declares this a sign of prosperity. Medieval people can discover omens in almost anything except perhaps genuinely obvious danger. You follow the wedding party into a long timber hall glowing with warmth. Fires roar beneath enormous chimneys, while tables groan beneath trenches of bread. Roasted fowl, onion pies, apples preserved in honey, and steaming pottage rich with barley and leeks. Music swells. Flows. The bride sits beside the groom beneath garlands of evergreen, while guests continue admiring her appearance openly. One woman praises the whiteness of her veil. Another compliments the embroidery at her cuffs. A third asks quietly what herb she used upon her hair. "Rosemary water," the bride answers shyly. Several women nod with approval. Rosemary appears to function simultaneously as seasoning, perfume, medicine, decoration, and possible spiritual protection. Medieval rosemary truly refuses to specialize. As the feast continues, heat and candlelight soften every face in the hall. Rough hands gleam golden around ale cups. Fur collars catch flickering firelight. Laughter rises toward the rafters where smoke drifts lazily overhead. For a little while, beauty stops feeling rigid. Not absent, never absent, but gentler somehow, shared, human. The bride eventually removes her heavy veil with visible relief, while children chase one another between benches and old men doze beside the fire. Outside, snow falls steadily now across the dark town streets and monastery roofs and frozen market stalls. And inside the warm, crowded hall, surrounded by music and wood smoke and candlelight dancing over smiling faces, you watch a medieval bride slowly transform from carefully arranged symbol into something much simpler. Just a tired young woman hoping her new life will be kind. Morning arrives beneath a sky the colour of unpolished pewter. Snow from the night before lies thin across rooftops and wagon tracks, already turning grey beneath boots and cart wheels. The wedding feast has ended in the usual medieval manner: too much ale, too little sleep, and at least one uncle snoring beneath a table while clutching half a pie like a sacred relic. You leave the town shortly after dawn. The gate guards stamp their feet against the cold while opening the heavy oak doors. Frost clings to their beards. One chews stale bread with the expression of a man deeply betrayed by winter. Beyond the walls stretches the forest road. It winds northward between bare trees whose branches knit together overhead like black veins against the pale sky. Snow softens the muddy ruts for now, though patches of frozen earth crunch sharply beneath your boots. Your breath hangs in the air beside the steam rising from a passing mule cart. The world feels quieter out here. No market shouting, no hammering workshops, only distant crows, creaking wagon wheels, and the steady whisper of wind moving through winter branches. You pull your cloak tighter and continue along the pilgrim road where travellers move slowly between shrines, villages, and monasteries scattered across the countryside. And almost immediately you begin noticing hair, or rather the careful hiding of it. Women travelling the road wear veils, kerchiefs, hoods, and wrapped linen coverings in endless variations. Some reveal only narrow frames of face. Others layer wool and cloth so thoroughly that not a single curl escapes the winter air. Hair carries enormous meaning here. Loose flowing hair belongs mostly to unmarried girls, holy paintings, and people about to make terrible decisions in ballads. Respectable married women cover their heads in public. Noble women wear elaborate veils pinned with jewels or embroidered bands. Peasant women tie linen cloths practically beneath the chin. Widows often adopt darker coverings altogether. A woman's hair can suggest modesty, status, morality, fertility, even obedience, which feels like a remarkable amount of responsibility for something that grows out of your scalp. Ahead on the road walks a group of pilgrims wearing heavy cloaks stitched with little badges from distant shrines. One older woman adjusts her veil repeatedly against the wind while her granddaughter skips beside her, bare-headed, golden hair flying wildly in the cold. The grandmother notices your glance. Let her enjoy it now, she sighs. Soon enough she'll spend half her life pinning cloth over it. The child grins triumphantly before immediately stepping into an icy puddle. Freedom, unfortunately, remains temporary. You walk together for a time beneath the forest canopy while snowflakes drift lazily through bare branches. The pilgrims share dried apples and coarse bread from cloth bundles. One man carries a staff decorated with tiny bells that chime softly as he walks. Their conversation turns naturally toward appearances. A young woman asks whether fair hair truly makes women more desirable at court. Another claims dark hair suits serious personalities better. An older pilgrim insists red hair indicates either strong luck or witchcraft, depending entirely upon who currently controls the local manor. No one can quite agree whether hair colour reflects destiny, temperament, or merely parental coincidence. The debate becomes surprisingly passionate. One traveller swears noble women in southern courts lighten their hair by sitting for hours in sunlight, wearing broad hats with open crowns, exposing only the hair itself. Another claims pigeon droppings improve colour brightness. You sincerely hope this second method remains unpopular. The forest road narrows ahead beside a frozen stream where moss-covered stones glisten beneath thin ice. Travellers move carefully here because carts frequently overturn in wet weather. Small wooden shrines stand at crossroads draped with faded ribbons and little carved saints blackened by rain. One shrine holds tiny offerings left by women seeking healthy children or protection during childbirth. Another supposedly protects travellers from wolves. Judging by nearby tracks, the wolves may not entirely respect the arrangement. As midday approaches, snow begins falling harder. You and the pilgrim shelter beside a roadside chapel maintained by hermit brothers during warmer months. Its stone walls trap enough warmth to feel miraculous. Inside, candles flicker before painted icons while travellers stamp snow from boots and unwrap scarves damp with melted frost. Someone starts a small fire using gathered branches. Wet wool and wood smoke quickly fill the little chapel. The older grandmother removes her veil carefully to dry beside the flames. Her hair underneath surprises you. Long silver braids, beautifully kept despite age and travel. The granddaughter stares admiringly. "You were pretty once," the child says with brutal honesty. The old woman bursts into laughter loud enough to disturb the candles. Once she replies, "Even medieval grandmothers possess dangerous confidence." As the storm thickens outside, conversation drifts toward courtly customs. One pilgrim claims noble women sleep wearing special cloths tied beneath the chin to preserve smooth cheeks and prevent wrinkles. Another insists certain queens braided pearls directly into their hair. A merchant's wife mentions women who shave the backs of their necks to create longer elegant lines beneath veils. Beauty here extends into strange hidden rituals no outsider fully sees. You realize how much effort medieval appearance requires before a person even leaves their bedchamber. Pins, oils, wrappings, linen cloths washed endlessly by hand, hair combed beside candles before dawn, and yet modesty remains essential. Women judged too vain risk criticism. Women judged careless risk equal criticism. The balance must be walked carefully, like travellers crossing icy stones in winter streams. Outside the chapel, the forest dims toward evening earlier than expected beneath the storm clouds. Snow muffles the road into near silence. A young pilgrim woman beside the fire quietly combs her hair with a carved bone comb before rewrapping it beneath linen. Her movements are practiced, gentle, almost meditative. Some swear hair absorbs spiritual influence, she explains softly. Certain women burn loose strands rather than throw them away, fearing witches or enemies might use them in charms. Even now, it is hard to tell whether anyone genuinely fears such magic or simply enjoys behaving cautiously around mysterious things. Perhaps caution itself becomes tradition after enough generations. The fire crackles lower while twilight gathers beyond the narrow chapel windows. Travellers settle into weary silence, listening to snow hiss softly against stone. You sit wrapped in your cloak, watching the women repin their veils before continuing the journey. Each fold of cloth transforms faces differently. One woman appears older, once covered. Another suddenly seems more graceful. A third becomes almost unreadable. Clothing reshapes identity here constantly. At last the snowfall weakens enough for travel again. The pilgrims rise stiffly, gathering bags and staffs while candlelight flicker across damp walls. Outside, the forest road gleams white beneath deepening dusk. The travellers move onward beneath swaying lanterns and drifting breath, their hidden hair tucked safely beneath wool and linen while winter closes softly around the road. And as you follow them through the snow-dark woods, listening to bells jingling faintly from pilgrim staff somewhere ahead, you begin understanding that medieval beauty is often defined not by what is shown, but by what is carefully concealed. By the time you reach the next town, evening has already swallowed the road whole. Snowmelt drips steadily from rooftops. Lanterns swing above narrow streets glazed with slush and horse tracks. Your boots ache from the frozen road. Your cloak smells faintly of wet wool and chapel smoke, and somewhere beneath all your layers you suspect your spine has quietly resigned from service. Still, warm light glows ahead through the crooked windows of a barber surgeon's shop. And in medieval Europe, that combination of barber and surgeon should alarm you slightly. The striped pole outside creaks in the wind while little painted signs promise shaving, bloodletting, tooth extraction, treatment of swellings, removal of boils, trimming of hair, and restoration of youthful appearance. An ambitious establishment. You duck inside mostly for warmth. Immediately heat, steam, and strange medicinal smells wrap around you. Vinegar, rosemary oil, burned herbs, soap made from animal fat, iron tools warming near the fire. The shop itself feels half grooming chamber, half battlefield infirmary. Razors gleam beside bone saws. Combs lie beside leech jars. A row of cloudy ceramic bottles lines the shelves while bundles of dried plants hang from rafters blackened by years of smoke. At the centre of the room stands the barber surgeon himself, broad-shouldered, red-faced, and wearing an apron that raises several deeply concerning questions. "Haircut," he asks. You glance toward the saws. Only the haircut part, ideally. He laughs loudly enough to shake dust from the beams. Several townsfolk wait inside on benches near the fire. One man has foam spread across his beard while another clutches his jaw miserably beneath a wool scarf. A woman near the window rubs ointment carefully into cracked winter hands. The barber surgeon works constantly. Snip of scissors. Scrape of razor. Muttered advice. Steam rising from hot water. Every few moments someone winces dramatically. You settle beside the hearth while observing the strange little theatre unfolding around you. Appearance matters enormously here, even among ordinary townsfolk battling winter mud and chronic exhaustion. Men keep beards trimmed according to local fashion. Women seek remedies for chapped skin and thinning hair. Apprentices smooth unruly bangs before courting girls in marketplaces. And the barber surgeon stands at the centre of all this quiet anxiety. A young apprentice sits nervously while the barber trims his hair with iron shears. Shorter around the ears, the boy requests. "You courting someone?" "No." The barber raises an eyebrow. "Then why care?" "Fair point." Nearby, the woman with cracked hands purchases goose-fat balm mixed with lavender and beeswax. She explains that cold weather has ruined her skin after weeks of washing linen in icy water. "May notice hands," she says quietly. The barber nods solemnly like a priest hearing confession. Winter beauty in medieval Europe becomes a constant battle against the climate itself. Skin splits from cold, lips chap, hair dulls beneath smoke and frost. People fight back using oils, herbs, wool wrappings, and optimism. Mostly optimism. A tooth draws patient finally takes the chair near the window. You immediately regret remaining indoors. The barber surgeon produces iron instruments with horrifying cheerfulness, while the poor man grips the arms of the chair hard enough to threaten structural damage. Rotten molar, the barber announces. A woman near the fire crosses herself. The extraction itself happens quickly, though quickly proves relative when accompanied by noises resembling a tree being uprooted during a thunderstorm. At last the barber triumphantly raises the tooth. Everyone applauds politely because medieval medicine values emotional support in place of anesthesia. The patient staggers away clutching cloth against his bleeding mouth, while the barber recommends rinsing with wine and avoiding cold air. Also avoid hard bread, he adds. This advice effectively eliminates half the medieval diet. While the tools are cleaned in steaming water, conversation drifts toward beauty remedies. One customer swears egg yolk strengthens hair. Another insists rosemary water darkens eyebrows. A merchant woman claims noble ladies use powdered chalk mixed with vinegar to whiten skin during winter feasts. The barber grimaces. Ruins the face after years. Yet people continue using it. No one can quite agree whether beauty standards survive because they work or simply because everyone fears looking unfashionable beside their neighbours. The barber eventually notices your interest in the shelves lining the wall. He proudly shows you jars of scented oils, combs carved from horn, razors imported from distant cities, tiny tweezers for plucking brows, and bundles of herbs tied with the linen string. Rosemary for hair, he explains, mint for breath, sage for gums, vinegar against lice. And the leeches, for people who think fewer bloods improve their appearance. He says this without irony. A nobleman enters soon after wrapped in a fur-lined cloak powdered with snow. His beard has clearly been arranged very carefully, each curl trimmed and shaped with deliberate precision. He requests scented oil and beard combing before attending a feast. The barber treats him with immediate ceremony. Warm cloths are prepared, oils rubbed carefully into the beard. Tiny scissors flash in candlelight while the nobleman studies himself in a polished metal mirror. Masculine beauty matters deeply too, you realize. Strong posture, controlled grooming, fashionable beards, smooth hands for nobles, scarred hands for soldiers, ink-stained fingers for clerks. Every class carries its own ideal. The nobleman complains quietly about a grey hair discovered near his temple. The barber studies it gravely. A distinguished mark, he assures him. This appears to be the medieval equivalent of lying kindly to someone over 40. Snow taps softly against the shutters while firelight dances across hanging razors. The shop grows warmer, sleepier as evening deepens. A travelling merchant now purchases perfume made from cloves and rose oil before explaining he hopes to impress a widow during supper. The barber nods approvingly. Scent reaches the heart faster than poetry. Considering medieval poetry, he may actually be correct. Near the hearth sits an old soldier whose face bears a long scar across one cheek. Rather than hide it, he strokes the mark proudly while telling stories of campaigns long ago. Certain scars enhance masculine beauty here, especially among soldiers and knights. They suggest courage, endurance, survival. But similar scars upon women invite harsher judgment. Beauty standards bend unevenly depending upon gender, class, and circumstance. A scar may transform one man into a hero, and one woman into an object of pity. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval society understands this contradiction or simply accepts it the way people accept winter storms. Outside, bells ring the evening hour while snow thickens once more beyond the windows. Customers gradually depart into the cold, carrying wrapped scarves around freshly shaved faces. The barber extinguishes several candles before closing his shop. You remain a moment longer near the fading fire, watching steam curl upward around combs and razors, resting quietly after the day's labour. Here in this cramped warm room, smelling of rosemary, soap, blood and smoke, medieval beauty no longer feels distant or ceremonial. It feels intimate. Human beings sitting beneath candlelight trying, in their own awkward, determined ways, to look healthier, younger, stronger, kinder, wealthier, more desirable, more loved. Trying, perhaps, to shape fragile mortal bodies into something briefly capable of resisting time. Outside, the winter wind sighs through the narrow streets. And one by one, the candles go dark. The snow stops sometime during the night. By morning, the town lies hushed beneath pale clouds, while water drips steadily from eaves and frozen wagon ruts soften into mud once more. Smoke rises straight upward in the still air. Somewhere nearby, a rooster announces dawn with the confidence of a creature contributing absolutely nothing to society besides noise. You leave the inn after a breakfast of coarse bread, smoked fish, and ale weak enough to qualify as philosophical water. The streets already bustle with craftsmen beginning their workday. Blacksmiths hammer iron in steaming workshops. Apprentices sweep snowmelt from doorways. Women carry baskets wrapped in cloth against the cold. And today, for the first time, you begin noticing the men as carefully as you once noticed the women. Not merely their faces, but the endless effort spent shaping them. A group of young squires crosses the square wearing fitted wool tunics belted tightly at the waist. Their boots are polished despite the mud, hair trimmed neatly around the ears. One boy keeps smoothing the faint beginnings of a moustache that resembles an exhausted mouse. Medieval masculinity, you realize, and contains just as many rituals as feminine beauty. Only fewer veils. You wander toward the training yard beside a minor lord's residence where soldiers practice beneath the weak winter sun. Frost still clings to the edges of wooden targets. Horses stamp impatiently near the stables while stable boys curry mud from their coats using stiff brushes. The knights training there wear padded jackets beneath mail, but even through layers of wool and leather you can see the importance placed upon posture and bearing. Shoulders back, chin raised, movements controlled. Strength alone is not enough. A knight must appear knightly. One older man with silver threading his beard pauses beside a water trough to adjust the fur lining at his collar, before speaking with a visiting noblewoman. Another smooths damp hair back beneath his hood after removing his helmet. Armor protects the body. Presentation protects reputation. No one can quite agree whether courtly ideals made knights more elegant or simply encouraged armoured men to spend astonishing amounts of time thinking about sleeves. Possibly both. Near the stables, a young page carefully cleans mud from his master's boots, while another oils a leather belt decorated with polished brass fittings. Clothing matters enormously for men of rank. Fine wool, imported dyes, jewelled buckles, fur collars, embroidered sleeves all announce wealth and refinement before a word is spoken. One nobleman rides past wearing crimson hose so bright they could probably be seen from neighbouring kingdoms. Subtlety, clearly, is not mandatory. You continue toward the market quarter, where barbers open their shutters and merchants display fabrics beneath awnings still dripping snowmelt. Outside a tailor's shop, two clerks debate whether short beards or clean-shaven faces appear more fashionable at court this season. Beards suggest wisdom, one insists. Beards suggest soup remains, replies the other. A fair criticism. Among scholars and clerks, appearance carries quieter signals. Ink-stained fingers suggest education. Clean robes suggest discipline. Thin, pale faces imply long hours spent reading beside candles rather than labouring outdoors. You pass a young scribe hurrying through the square, clutching parchment beneath his cloak. His hair has been trimmed into a careful, rounded style, fashionable among educated men. Unfortunately, the wind immediately destroys it. Nature remains unimpressed by scholarship. At a nearby fountain, several apprentices wash before work despite the freezing cold. Hands scrubbed, hair flattened with water, faces rubbed awake. Cleanliness among townsmen may not reach noble standards, but effort certainly exists. A butcher emerging from the wash basin splashes scented vinegar beneath his arms. You courting another man asks. No, the butcher replies, customers. Honestly sensible. As midday approaches, you enter a crowded cloth hall where merchants sell wool, linen, belts, gloves, hats, and fur-lined cloaks. Men browse fabrics with surprising intensity. One merchant explains proudly that certain shades of blue indicate prosperity, while darker blacks require expensive dyes only wealthy people can afford consistently. Even colour becomes beauty. A prosperous merchant examining gloves beside you complains bitterly about thinning hair. His companion recommends rubbing garlic into the scalp. Did it work for you? No. Then why suggest it? The man shrugs. We remain hopeful. Human history, you suspect, survives largely through misplaced optimism. At the far end of the hall stands a perfume seller displaying tiny glass bottles imported from southern ports. Men purchase scented oils alongside women clove, cedar, rosemary, orange peel, rose. A knight testing one perfume dabs it carefully along his gloves. Scent lingers in memory, the seller says. The knight nods with grave seriousness as though discussing military strategy. Perhaps he is. Courtly culture increasingly demands refinement from noble men. Graceful dancing, poetry, fashionable clothing, elegant manners, controlled emotions at least in theory. Real knights still sweat heavily, fall off horses, and occasionally lose arguments to staircases, but the ideal remains polished. You notice this especially when passing the manor gardens where several young nobles practice conversation beside frozen hedges. Their cloaks hang perfectly, their boots remain improbably clean. One man recites poetry to a lady standing beneath a bare apple tree. Unfortunately, he becomes so focused on sounding romantic that he backs directly into a bird bath. The lady laughs so hard she nearly drops her veil. Oddly enough, this seems to improve his chances. Across medieval Europe, beauty in men balances awkwardly between strength and refinement. Too rough, and a nobleman appears uncivilized, too delicate, and people whisper unkind things about softness. The ideal knight somehow hunts boars, writes poetry, smells pleasant, fights wars, dances elegantly, and maintains attractive hair in wet weather. A demanding lifestyle. You leave the garden smiling faintly while afternoon light fades toward grey once more. Smoke thickens above rooftops. Bells ring from distant churches. Somewhere nearby a cook roasts chestnuts over charcoal, filling the lane with warm sweet scent. Near the town gate you encounter an old veteran sharpening a knife beside a brazier. His beard grows uneven now, his nose bent from some ancient injury, but his blue cloak remains brushed clean, and his boots carefully maintained. He catches you looking. Old age comes for beauty, he says calmly. Then he taps the polished buckle at his belt. But no reason to surrender early. You carry those words with you as evening settles over the streets. Because beneath all the powders and veils and combs and perfumes, beneath the noble mirrors and monastery manuscripts and barber surgeons' alarming tools, the strange beauty standards of medieval Europe reveal something unexpectedly familiar. Everyone fears fading. Everyone wishes to be admired a little longer. Everyone hopes the face staring back from dim metal mirrors still carries some trace of worth beneath the winters and smoke and passing years. The bells ring again through the cold air while darkness gathers slowly between the houses, and in the fading light, men and women alike continue adjusting collars, smoothing hair, trimming beards, pinning veils, and stepping carefully into another medieval evening, still trying to become, somehow, the ideal version of themselves. The road beyond the town bends westward through rolling fields glazed silver with frost. Winter wheat sleeps beneath the earth. Thin smoke rises from scattered cottages where shepherds and widows begin their morning fires. Overhead, clouds drift slowly across a pale sky, while distant monastery bells carry across the open countryside in soft uneven waves. You join the pilgrim road again before dawn fully breaks. Travellers move steadily through the cold wrapped in layered cloaks and wool hoods, their boots crunching over frozen mud. Some carry staffs capped with iron tips, others lead donkeys loaded with blankets, pots, and bundles of dried food. Tiny lead pilgrim badges glint upon hats and cloaks whenever sunlight briefly escapes the clouds. The badges fascinate you. Shells from sacred shrines, tiny saints pressed into lead, little crosses, keys, swords, or martyr symbols pinned proudly to rough wool. They serve partly as proof of devotion, partly as souvenirs, and partly as a medieval way of announcing yes. I walked 300 freezing miles and all I got was this badge. Still, people cherish them. A woman beside you wears half a dozen stitched carefully along her sleeve. She notices your curiosity and explains each one came from a different shrine visited after surviving an illness years ago. Holy places leave marks, she says quietly. And today, as the pilgrim road winds onward through fields and villages, you begin noticing how closely beauty and holiness intertwine in the medieval imagination. A young monk walking ahead possesses the pale luminous skin admired in noble courts. A passing merchant woman whispers approvingly that he looks almost saintly. Not handsome, saintly. The distinction matters. Throughout medieval Europe, spiritual purity often becomes tangled with physical appearance. Paintings of saints glow with smooth faces, calm eyes, golden hair, and untouched skin. Illness, meanwhile, frequently appears in art as visible corruption sores, swelling, scars, twisted limbs. People fear sickness not only for pain or death, but because disease visibly alters the body itself. Beauty becomes reassurance, proof, perhaps, that God still favours you. No one can quite agree whether holy people were considered beautiful because beauty suggested divine favour, or whether artists simply preferred painting attractive saints. Possibly painters were human before they were holy. The pilgrims stop near midday beside a roadside shrine built around an ancient spring. Moss creeps over the stones. Candles flicker behind cloudy glass while frozen ivy clings stubbornly to the walls. Travellers gather there to pray, eat, warm hands, and refill water flasks. An old woman kneels before the shrine, touching a saint's image with careful reverence. Her face bears deep lines from weather and age, yet several younger pilgrims still describe her afterward as beautiful. Not because she resembles noble ideals, because devotion itself changes how people see her. You sit nearby sharing coarse bread and smoked eel with a pair of brothers journeying toward a distant abbey. One explains that certain pilgrims deliberately fast during travel, believing spiritual discipline creates a more radiant face. The other brother eyes him skeptically. You just look hungry. Fair again. Still, fasting remains deeply tied to medieval concepts of holiness and appearance. Thinness sometimes suggests discipline, self-control, closeness to God. Too much softness risks accusations of greed or vanity. And yet feast days celebrate abundance extravagantly. The medieval world rarely fears contradiction. Nearby, several women adjust their veils beside the spring using its surface as a mirror. One smooths chapped cheeks with goose-fat balm. Another pins a pilgrim badge carefully beside her throat. Even on sacred journeys, appearance matters. Perhaps especially then. The road continues through a village where church walls display faded paintings of saints with bright cheeks and flowing robes untouched by mud. Children gather near the travellers begging for stories and pennies. A blacksmith pauses his work to stare openly at one particularly handsome knight riding with another pilgrim group. "Looks like St. Michael himself," the blacksmith mutters. The knight promptly sneezes hard enough to nearly fall from the saddle. Humanity restored. As evening approaches, the pilgrims reach a larger shrine maintained by canons in dark wool robes. Lanterns glow beneath archways while smoke curls from kitchens preparing supper for travellers. Inside the guest hall, warmth spreads instantly through numb fingers and frozen boots. Wet cloaks hang drying beside roaring hearths. The room hums with quiet conversation and the clatter of bowls. You settle onto a bench while servants ladle thick lentil stew into trenchers of bread. Steam rises richly scented with onions and herbs. Across the hall sits a noblewoman travelling under religious vow. Unlike court ladies you've seen before, she wears no jewels beyond a small silver cross. Her veil remains simple, her face unpainted. And yet everyone notices her immediately, not merely because of rank, because serenity itself has become beautiful. The canons speak respectfully with her while poorer pilgrims watch with admiration. Candlelight softens her tired features. Her hands remain roughened slightly from travel despite obvious wealth. You overhear another woman whisper. She glows. No powders, no perfumes, just exhaustion, candlelight, and human projection doing remarkable work together. A travelling physician near the fire soon begins discussing complexion theories after too much wine. According to him, balance between bodily humours determines attractiveness. Too much black bile creates melancholy faces. Too much blood produces redness. Too much phlegm dulls the eyes. You listen carefully while secretly concluding medieval medicine often sounds like people inventing excuses after staring thoughtfully at soup. Still, everyone nearby takes the lecture seriously. A merchant even asks whether pilgrimage improves complexion. Spiritually, perhaps, the physician replies. Not exactly a ringing endorsement. Later in the evening, musicians play softly near the hearth while pilgrims trade stories beneath smoke-dark rafters. One man claims he saw a saint's relic heal blindness. Another insists holy springs preserve youthfulness if visited under the proper moon. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which moon qualifies. The fire burns lower. Outside, frost gathers once more along the shrine walls and bare hedges beyond the road. Inside, tired travellers loosen boots, unwrap scarves, and settle beneath wool blankets spread across the floor. You notice how pilgrimage changes people's appearances gradually. Faces redden from wind. Hair escapes carefully pinned coverings. Boots wear thin, yet eyes grow brighter somehow. Perhaps shared hardship softens vanity, or perhaps long roads simply remind travellers how temporary every face becomes beneath time and weather. Even now, it's hard to tell whether medieval beauty standards grow weaker during pilgrimage or merely transform into something gentler. A warm expression, a calm voice, patience beside weary strangers, the ability to endure cold roads without complaining every third step. Truly the rarest beauty of all. The bells ring softly for evening prayer while candles shrink lower into their holders. Around you, pilgrims drift slowly towards sleep wrapped in cloaks smelling of frost, smoke, rosemary, and long miles travelled beneath winter skies. And as the sacred road settles into silence around the fading firelight, you begin sensing that medieval Europe never separates beauty entirely from the soul. Whether wisely or foolishly, people here keep searching faces for signs of goodness. And sometimes, in the quiet glow of candlelight after a long cold journey, they almost seem to find it. The frost deepens overnight. When dawn finally creeps across the pilgrim shrine, the windows glow pale blue with ice and every breath hangs silver in the air. Travellers rise slowly from blankets spread across the floor, muttering prayers and complaints in equal measure while stamping warmth back into frozen feet. Someone near the doorway attempts to put on boots still damp from yesterday. The resulting expression suggests a profound spiritual crisis. You wrap your cloak tightly and step outside into the brittle cold morning. Frost crystals glitter across hedges and wagon tracks. The world feels strangely sharpened, every sound carrying farther through the frozen air distant bells, barking dogs, crows calling over empty fields. Today the road leads toward a manor estate preparing for the harshest stretch of winter. And with winter comes another quiet force shaping medieval beauty more than fashion ever could survival itself. The countryside appears subdued beneath the cold. Smoke rises from low cottages where families ration firewood carefully. Sheep huddle against stone walls crusted with frost. A farmer hacks ice from a water trough while muttering darkly about weather, which has apparently offended him personally. You follow the road toward the manor storehouses where peasants arrive with carts of grain, salted fish, turnips, onions, smoked meat, dried apples, and barrels of ale meant to sustain the estate through winter months. The place smells of straw, cold earth, wool, and preservation. Inside the largest storehouse, lanterns glow dimly above towering sacks of grain stacked beside hanging herbs and cured meats darkened by smoke. Servants hurry through the aisles, counting supplies with increasingly anxious expressions. Winter strips away illusions quickly. Beauty changes during these months. Faces pale from poor sunlight, lips crack from cold wind, hands redden and split from labour, hair dulls beneath smoke-filled halls where people crowd together for warmth. Thinness no longer suggests elegance once food grows scarce. A healthy winter body becomes desirable precisely because it signals endurance. You warm your hands near a brazier while two manor women discuss the condition of their skin with deep concern. The cold ruins everything, one sighs. The other recommends goose grease mixed with honey and rosemary. Again rosemary appears, bravely attempting to solve civilization. Nearby, a servant girl rubs rendered fat carefully into her hands before returning to work. Winter remedies rely heavily on whatever the household can spare: animal grease, herbs, oils, vinegar rinses, warm cloths, wool wrappings. Not glamorous, perhaps, but practical beauty rarely is. The manor steward passes, carrying iron keys large enough to imprison giants. Frost whitens his beard. He pauses beside the grain bins to inspect workers unloading sacks from a wagon. One labourer coughs harshly into the cold air. Immediately, several people glance toward him uneasily. Illness spreads quickly in winter halls crowded with smoke and poor ventilation. A healthy complexion during these months becomes almost a luxury item. No one can quite agree whether rosy cheeks indicate vitality or the beginning of fever. Sometimes the difference arrives too late. In the kitchens nearby, cooks prepare massive pots of pottage thick with barley and onions, while smoke curls upward through blackened rafters. The warmth there feels heavenly after the frozen yard outside. You sit near the ovens watching servants knead bread dough beside hanging bundles of garlic and sage. Steam fogs the windows completely. A kitchen boy turns spits over crackling fires, while older women argue about remedies for dry skin. Milk cream, one insists. Too expensive. Then oil foam. That only improves the mood. Perhaps that is improvement enough. At the far table sits the manor lady herself, wrapped in layers of fur-lined wool, while a maid brushes her hair slowly beside the fire. Even in winter isolation, appearance still demands attention. Her skin remains remarkably pale despite the cold months because noblewomen avoid outdoor labour whenever possible. Yet winter weakens everyone eventually. Shadows darken beneath tired eyes. Fingers stiffen from cold. The maid rubs scented oil into the lady's hands while discussing preparations for an upcoming feast. Beauty requires maintenance even while snow gathers against the doors. You notice too how winter changes clothing into beauty itself. Thick cloaks lined with fox or rabbit fur, fine gloves, embroidered hoods, rich fabrics layered against the cold. A well-dressed person in winter does not merely appear attractive. They appear protected. Outside in the manor yard, peasants unloading carts look weathered already despite the season barely beginning. Their faces redden raw beneath the wind, wool cloaks stiffen with frost, boots leak icy water into numb feet. And yet even here, small acts of beauty survive stubbornly. A girl ties blue ribbon into her braid despite working in the freezing yard. A stable boy smooths his hair using melted snow before speaking to a dairymaid. An old shepherd carefully cleans mud from his best cloak before entering the hall. Humans remain wonderfully committed to appearances under objectively terrible circumstances. As evening approaches, snow clouds gather again over the fields while workers finish stacking winter stores. Lanterns glow warmly through the growing dark. Somewhere nearby, pigs squeal angrily from their pens as though personally offended by agriculture. You help carry bundles of dried herbs into storage where the air smells intensely of thyme, mint, rosemary, lavender, and sage hanging from ceiling beams. A servant explains many households burn herbs through winter, believing fragrant smoke prevents sickness and lifts melancholy spirits. Some swear certain scents preserve youth itself. Others simply prefer not smelling the pigs. Reasonable either way. Later, inside the great hall, supper is served early against the deepening storm outside. Thick stew, coarse bread, smoked eel, and warmed ale circulate among the household while logs hiss in the fireplaces. The hall feels softer tonight somehow. Winter forces closeness. People sit nearer one another, share blankets, pass bowls hand to hand. Faces glow red-gold beneath candlelight while wind rattles the shutters. A young mother near the hearth braids her daughter's hair carefully before bed. Nearby, an elderly servant oils cracked hands while listening to a minstrel sing quietly about summer roses and courtly ladies. No one listening looks remotely like summer roses, yet perhaps that is precisely why the songs matter. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval beauty standards exist to celebrate reality or escape from it. Outside, the storm begins at last. Snow sweeps across the manor yard while darkness swallows the fields beyond the walls. Inside, warmth and candlelight hold the winter back for another night. You settle beneath heavy wool blankets near the fire, listening to the household slowly quiet around you. Boots removed, voices lowered, children sleeping beside mothers, dogs curling into straw. And in the flickering light of the great hall, you realize the strange beauty standards of medieval Europe cannot be separated from the seasons themselves. Winter reshapes every face, not equally, but inevitably. The storm passes sometime before dawn, leaving the world hushed beneath deep, untouched snow. When morning arrives, pale sunlight spills weakly across the manor yard and turns every rooftop silver white. Smoke rises from chimneys in long, quiet ribbons. Horses snort steam into the freezing air while servants shovel paths through drifts already crusting with ice. Inside the great hall, preparations for tonight's feast begin before breakfast has even ended. Winter feasts matter enormously in medieval life. They interrupt darkness. They reassure frightened households that food still remains in the storehouses. They display wealth, loyalty, hospitality, and status all at once. And perhaps most importantly, they allow everyone to dress dramatically while pretending not to care very much about it. The hall transforms steadily throughout the day. Fresh rushes scented with herbs are spread across the stone floors. Tapestries depicting hunts and saints are shaken free of dust and rehung along the walls. Beeswax candles arrive in bundles while servants polish cups until they catch pale afternoon light. The smell of roasting meat slowly fills the air. You spend part of the morning near the kitchens where cooks labour beside enormous fires, cheeks flushed from heat, geese are plucked, pies sealed with thick pastry, onions chopped by the bucketful, honey cakes stacked carefully beneath cloth. One cook complains that feast preparation ruins the complexion through sweat and smoke. Another replies that surviving winter matters slightly more than complexion. This argument remains unresolved. By midday, guests begin arriving through the snowy gates. Lesser nobles, merchants, local reeves, priests, and neighbouring landholders enter stamping snow from boots, while servants whisk away cloaks crusted with frost. And now, beneath candlelight and winter silk and fur, medieval beauty becomes theatre again. The transformation happens almost magically. A merchant's wife you barely noticed yesterday now glows in deep green wool trimmed with squirrel fur. A knight who looked exhausted in the snow suddenly appears imposing beneath polished boots and a silver belt. Veils shimmer softly in the candlelight. Perfumes drift through the hall: rosemary, rose oil, cedar, clove. Appearance tonight is carefully constructed. Women powder faces lightly to soften winter redness. Men trim beards before arriving. Hair is braided, pinned, perfumed, curled near heated irons, or hidden beneath embroidered coverings depending on fashion and status. Even the servants scrub themselves as thoroughly as the weather allows. A kitchen boy proudly informs another servant he washed twice this week for the feast. An impressive commitment under medieval conditions. You watch noble women gather near the hearth where mirrors of polished silver and bronze pass discreetly from hand to hand. One adjusts her veil repeatedly. Another pinches colour into pale cheeks dulled by winter. A third quietly powders her neck while pretending not to. The room hums with subtle competition. Not cruel exactly, just human. No one can quite agree whether medieval feasts celebrate community or provide opportunities for everyone to judge one another's sleeves. Likely both again. As twilight settles beyond the windows, musicians begin tuning lutes and fiddles near the dais. Candles are lit one by one until golden light floods the hall and pushes winter darkness back beyond the shutters. And suddenly everyone becomes more beautiful. That is the strange power of candlelight. Scarred faces soften, tired eyes shine warmly, fine fabrics catch the glow, shadows hide imperfections while flames dance across polished cups and jewelled brooches. Even the food contributes. Roasted meats glisten richly beside bowls of apples preserved in honey, bright saffron sauces, dark red wine, white trenches of bread. Colour itself becomes luxury during winter months dominated by mud and grey skies. You take a place farther down the table among lesser guests while the Lord's household gathers near the raised dais. Servants move constantly through the crowd carrying platters above their heads. Conversation swells around you. Compliments drift through the air disguised as casual remarks. Her veil embroidery is remarkable. He's grown distinguished since autumn. That fur must have cost a fortune. You can tell she comes from good breeding. Beauty and status weave together so tightly here they become nearly inseparable. A young knight across the table smooths his hair every few minutes whenever a noble woman glances nearby. Unfortunately, he uses far too much scented oil, causing his entire head to shine like a polished chestnut beneath the candles. Courtship requires sacrifice. Beside him, an older widow wears dark blue wool so elegantly arranged that half the hall watches her when she moves. She possesses none of the fragile youthful beauty praised in songs. Her hands show age, fine lines mark her face, yet confidence itself transforms her. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people admire beauty naturally or whether confidence teaches others what to admire. The feast continues for hours. Musicians play while servants refill cups endlessly. Stories grow louder. Faces flush from wine and heat. Outside the windows, snow falls once more through the darkness. At one point, entertainers arrive wearing masks painted with exaggerated beautiful features, tiny mouths, enormous eyes, golden curls. The performance mocks vanity gently while the audience laughs into their cups. Interestingly, the most richly dressed nobles laugh hardest. Human beings adore criticizing vanity almost as much as practicing it. Near midnight, the hall grows softer and dreamier beneath smoke-dark rafters. Candles burn lower. Music slows. Children fall asleep against mothers wrapped in wool cloaks. You notice small details now rather than grand impressions. A servant girl secretly rebraiding loose hair behind a tapestry. An old knight polishing food stains from his belt before anyone notices. A merchant touching perfume discreetly beneath his beard. A woman checking her reflection in dark wine. Tiny acts of self-awareness scattered through the feast like sparks. And beneath them all lingers the deeper truth haunting medieval beauty standards: appearance shapes opportunity. A lovely face may secure marriage. Fine clothing may earn respect. Healthy skin may imply divine favour. Graceful manners may open doors that remain closed to rougher souls. People know this instinctively. That knowledge lives in every polished boot, every pinned veil, every carefully trimmed beard glowing beneath candlelight tonight. The fire crackles lower while musicians play one final slow melody near the hearth. Outside, winter presses softly against the walls of the manor. Inside, warmth and beauty and exhaustion mingle together beneath drifting smoke. And as the feast slowly fades towards silence, you begin understanding why medieval people devoted such effort to appearances despite hardship all around them. Because in a cold, uncertain world, beauty, however fragile, however artificial, offers reassurance that life contains more than survival alone. Morning after the feast arrives cruelly bright. Snow outside reflects pale winter sunlight directly through the narrow hall windows, while half the household moves with the careful quiet of people negotiating private headaches. The great hall smells faintly of extinguished candles, stale ale, cold ashes, and abandoned ambition. Servants clear trenches from the tables while dogs conduct hopeful inspections beneath the benches. You step outside into crisp, freezing air that feels sharp enough to polish the inside of your lungs. Frost crackles beneath your boots as you follow a narrow lane leading from the manor toward the village court. Today is court day, and court day, you quickly discover, turns appearance into public evidence. Villagers gather beneath a timber-roofed hall beside the manor granary, while reeves organize disputes involving land, debts, wandering pigs, broken fences, and at least one chicken-related accusation growing strangely emotional. Snowmelt drips steadily from the eaves. Men stamp warmth into their feet. Women clutch cloaks tightly beneath the cold wind. everyone watches everyone else with remarkable attentiveness. Because reputation lives here almost visibly upon the body. A clean cloak suggests discipline. Well-mended sleeves suggest stability. Mud-stained boots may suggest hard work or carelessness depending upon who dislikes you. A scar may inspire respect. Or suspicion. Nothing exists alone. You stand near the edge of the gathering while townsfolk file slowly into the hall. Some arrive carefully dressed despite obvious poverty. Others attempt noble elegance, with results varying between charming and deeply ambitious. One farmer has trimmed his beard so unevenly he appears to have argued with a hedge and lost. Still, effort matters. Inside the court hall, smoke curls upward toward rafters darkened by generations of winter fires. Rushes crunch underfoot. The steward sits beneath the Lord's banner beside scribes already staining their fingers with ink. The villagers waiting for judgment stand in little clusters whispering nervously. And everywhere you look, people quietly evaluate appearances before hearing a single word. A widow accused of withholding grain rents enters wearing dark wool neatly brushed clean. Her posture remains calm, hair hidden carefully beneath linen. She looks respectable enough, someone murmurs nearby, as though morality can be pressed into clothing folds. Next arrives a miller's son accused of brawling during the feast. Unfortunately, he still bears a spectacular purple bruise across one cheek and smells faintly of ale. His case begins poorly before he even speaks. No one can quite agree whether medieval courts truly seek justice or merely reward whichever person appears most trustworthy beneath candlelight. Likely a little of both. You notice too how beauty standards shape women's reputations more sharply here. A young unmarried woman with loose hair and bright ribbons attracts disapproving glances from older villagers almost immediately. "Too bold," whispers one matron. Meanwhile, a prosperous merchant with velvet sleeves and scented gloves receives approving nods, despite openly cheating 3 separate tax systems according to local gossip. Human beings remain wonderfully consistent across centuries. Outside the hall, villagers wait their turn beside smoking braziers while snow softens into freezing drizzle overhead. Conversations drift constantly toward appearance. "Did you see her necklace? He looks sickly. She's aged terribly since harvest. That scar makes him look dangerous." Beauty here functions almost like currency. Not absolute, not fair, but powerful. A shepherd warming his hands beside you explains that people trust attractive faces more easily. "Especially smooth ones," he adds thoughtfully. This feels unwise historically. Nearby, 2 older women discuss a local girl soon to marry into a prosperous family. They praise her modest veils, quiet manners, and pale complexion, while criticizing another girl for laughing too loudly during church festivals. Even joy must apparently remain fashionable. Inside the court hall, a dispute between 2 merchants grows heated enough that the steward threatens fines for shouting. One man accuses the other of fraud, while dramatically pointing at his opponent's shifty eyes. The accused merchant immediately objects that his eyes are perfectly honourable. The argument nearly collapses into a debate over eyebrows. Meanwhile, the scribes continue writing patiently, their expressions suggesting they have witnessed far stranger things. You wander toward the churchyard during a pause in proceedings. Snow gathers lightly atop gravestones while ravens perch along the wall, watching villagers with grim professional interest. Near the gate, a woman sells ribbons, combs, and tiny mirrors from a wooden tray despite the cold. Several girls crowd around admiring dyed ribbons imported from distant towns. Even on court day, beauty survives. Perhaps especially on court day. A handsome appearance may soften gossip. Good clothing may imply reliability. Graceful manners may persuade judges subconsciously before evidence even appears. and everyone here knows it. Back inside the hall, an elderly man stands accused of stealing firewood. His cloak hangs patched and threadbare. One boot splits visibly at the side. Exhaustion shadows his face. He looks defeated before speaking. The steward's expression softens almost immediately. Poverty itself reshapes beauty standards too. Harsh labour, hunger, illness, and cold age people quickly. Missing teeth, bent backs, scarred hands, these become ordinary marks of survival rather than moral failings among villagers who understand hardship personally. Yet class changes interpretation. A weathered nobleman may appear rugged. A weathered peasant simply appears old. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval people consciously recognize these double standards or merely breathe them like winter smoke. By afternoon, the drizzle thickens again. Court finally ends beneath darkening skies while villagers spill back into the muddy lanes carrying judgments, fines, grudges, and gossip homeward beneath wool cloaks. The conversations continue instantly. People dissect testimonies and appearances with equal enthusiasm. She cried convincingly. He never looked honest. That woman carries herself too proudly. His daughter's prettier than her mother was. Nothing escapes notice in a medieval village. You retreat at last toward a small alehouse near the road where travellers warm themselves beside a smoky fire. The room smells of onions, wet leather, and damp sheepdog. A minstrel sings quietly near the hearth while locals continue discussing the day's court proceedings over cups of hot ale. One old woman listening nearby finally snorts. Pretty faces lie easiest, she mutters. Then she takes another drink and adds, ugly ones just get blamed faster. The table falls silent for a moment. Outside, evening gathers slowly across the village while church bells ring through mist and freezing rain. Lanterns flicker behind shuttered windows. Smoke thickens above the roofs. And as you sit warming cold hands beside the fire, listening to the endless murmur of judgment and gossip drifting through the room, you begin understanding something unsettling beneath all the strange beauty standards of medieval Europe. People are not merely trying to look beautiful. They are trying to look worthy. The rain follows you for 2 days along the roadside. Not violent rain. Medieval weather rarely bothers with dramatic timing. This is the steady, patient kind that soaks cloaks, leaks through boots, turns roads into brown rivers, and persuades every joint in your body to complain individually. The countryside blurs into wet hedges and dripping trees beneath low grey skies. Travellers move hunched against the cold while wagon wheels sink deep into mud. Somewhere ahead, monastery bells drift faintly through the mist like sounds remembered from dreams. You walk mostly alone now. The pilgrim company has scattered toward different roads and shrines, leaving only occasional travellers passing beneath the drizzle merchants with covered carts, monks leading tired mules, soldiers splashed to the knees with mud. And gradually, beneath endless rain and exhaustion, appearances begin unravelling. Hair escapes beneath veils. Perfumes fade. Boot polish surrenders completely. Everyone starts looking unmistakably human again. By late afternoon, you reach a roadside shrine tucked beneath a grove of bare ash trees. Moss covers the stone walls. Water drips steadily from the roof edge into puddles below. A single lantern burns behind cloudy glass beside the doorway. You step inside, grateful for even partial shelter. Several travellers already crowd the little shrine, wrapped in damp cloaks steaming faintly near a small fire built in an iron basin. The room smells of wet wool, smoke, muddy leather, and rosemary tossed into the flames by someone still bravely attempting fragrance. A woman near the wall wrings rainwater from her veil with visible irritation. Another traveller laughs softly. After 3 days on the road, he says, We all resemble abandoned turnips anyway. No one disagrees. You settle near the warmth while rain hisses softly outside against the stones. Candlelight flickers before faded paintings of saints whose once bright faces have dimmed beneath centuries of smoke and dampness. The paint peels slightly now. Goldly flakes from halos. Even holiness fades eventually under weather. An elderly pilgrim sits across from you polishing a tiny silver reliquary with astonishing care despite the miserable conditions. Beside him rests a polished hand mirror wrapped carefully in cloth. You ask why he carries it. To remember my wife, he says simply. Inside the mirror's lid, barely visible in the candlelight, rests a tiny painted portrait of a woman young enough to belong to another century entirely. Smooth skin, bright eyes, golden braid. The old man studies it quietly while rain taps overhead. She never truly looked like that, he admits after a while. Not even then. The confession hangs softly in the warm, smoky air. And suddenly the whole strange world of medieval beauty begins shifting around you. Because paintings flatter. Poems exaggerate. Memories soften. Beauty itself becomes part truth, part longing. No one can quite agree whether people remember faces accurately or merely remember how those faces once made them feel. A young mother beside the fire unwraps her sleeping child from damp blankets. The girl's hair sticks wildly in every direction. Mud stains one sleeve. Her cheeks glow red from cold. Yet when the mother brushes tangled curls gently from the child's forehead, the expression on her face carries more tenderness than any courtly love song. Nearby, a merchant examines his reflection in a puddle of rainwater gathered near the doorway. After a long silence, he sighs dramatically. I was more handsome before this road. A monk warming his hands nearby replies, we all were. Perhaps this is the truest medieval wisdom you've heard so far. As darkness deepens outside, travellers begin sharing food beside the fire, coarse bread, smoked fish, nuts wrapped in cloth, dried apples slightly softened by damp air. Simple things. The conversations tonight feel gentler than before, less concerned with perfect appearances, more interested in survival, warmth, companionship. A woman whose face bears faint pox scars tells stories that make the entire shrine laugh quietly. A soldier missing 2 teeth shares his wine willingly with strangers. An old nun with weathered hands sings softly while mending torn gloves beside the lantern. And little by little, candlelight transforms them all. Not into youthful ideals, not into saints, simply into people carrying one another through the dark. Outside, rainwater runs steadily down the roadside crosses and shrine walls, washing mud from carved faces already worn smooth by centuries of weather. You step briefly beneath the doorway and look toward the road disappearing into mist. Travel changes beauty. Long journeys strip away powders and perfumes and polished performances. Wind roughens skin. Hunger sharpens cheeks. Rain collapses carefully arranged hair into miserable strings. Yet sometimes something softer appears underneath. Patience. Humour. Kindness shared beside cold fires. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval beauty standards survive the road at all, or whether the road quietly exposes what mattered underneath them from the beginning. Back inside the shrine, the old pilgrim finally closes his little mirror and tucks it away carefully. She grew old, he says after a long silence. I did too. The fire crackles softly. But I think, he continues, we became dearer looking to one another every year. No one answers immediately. The rain speaks gently against the roof. Candles tremble in their holders. Somewhere beyond the trees, bells ring faintly through the mist once more. You notice now how tired everyone appears. Faces lined from weather. Hands roughened by work. eyes shadowed from years of winters and griefs and roads travelled too far. And yet the room feels beautiful anyway, perhaps because perfection has finally left it alone. A young traveller near the fire removes jewelled pins from her damp hair one by one, no longer caring how carefully it falls afterward. A knight dries muddy gloves beside the flames while listening quietly to the nun sing. The child sleeping beneath blankets murmurs softly in dreams. Outside, darkness thickens across the rain-soaked countryside until the medieval world itself seems to blur at the edges. The roads, the castles, the painted ideals, the mirrors and powders and ribbons and silver combs, all slowly dissolving beneath weather and time. You settle deeper into your cloak, listening to the low murmur of tired voices and the soft hiss of rain beyond the walls. And for the first time since entering this strange medieval world, beauty no longer feels like something people are chasing, only something briefly glowing between them before the candles burn out. Dawn arrives quietly at the roadside shrine. The rain has finally stopped. Mist drifts low across the fields beyond the trees, while the world waits in that soft pale stillness, belonging only to winter mornings before people fully wake. The fire beside the shrine has collapsed into glowing embers. Wet cloaks steam gently where they hang drying near the wall. One by one the travellers stir, boots pulled on slowly, blankets folded, hands warmed over fading coals. Nobody speaks very loudly. After long roads and cold nights, people begin treating silence carefully, like something fragile that should not be broken without reason. Outside, frost silvering the grass catches the first weak sunlight. The muddy road ahead winds toward distant hills where, barely visible through the mist, a keep rises dark against the brightening sky. You set out with the others beneath the fading stars. The air smells wonderfully clean after rain-wet earth. Wood smoke, cold stone, distant pine. Ravens circle slowly above the fields, while somewhere unseen, a church bell rings the first prayer of morning. The travellers walk close together for warmth at first, their breath drifting upward in pale clouds. And now, after all these roads and halls and winter feasts and smoky taverns, the strange beauty standards of medieval Europe seem softer around the edges, less ridiculous perhaps, or maybe simply more understandable. You remember the noblewomen plucking their hairlines by candlelight, the merchants buying perfumes in crowded cloth halls, the barber surgeon polishing razors beside jars of leeches, the bride trembling beneath her carefully pinned veil, the peasants praising strong hands and healthy cheeks, the pilgrims searching faces for signs of holiness, all of them trying, in their own ways, to push back gently against the harshness surrounding them, against cold winters, against sickness, against time itself. The road climbs slowly toward the distant keep while frost crunches beneath your boots. Beside you, the old pilgrim with the tiny painted mirror walks carefully using his ashwood staff. The young mother carries her sleeping child wrapped deep in wool blankets. No one looks particularly beautiful this morning by courtly standards. Faces remain pale from cold. Hair hides untidily beneath hoods. Eyes still heavy with sleep. And yet the quiet companionship of the road gives everyone a kind of warmth no powder or jewel could imitate. A shepherd passes driving sheep through the mist while singing softly to himself. The tune drifts across the frosted fields in little fragments before vanishing into the morning air. Ahead, sunlight slowly touches the upper stones of the keep. The towers glow gold for a moment, then grey again. Even now, it is hard to tell whether beauty ever truly belongs to objects themselves, or only to passing moments of light. The travellers stop briefly beside a frozen stream, where thin ice cracks softly beneath flowing water. A young woman kneels to wash her face despite the cold, gasping immediately afterward while everyone else laughs sleepily. Vanity survives winter, the old pilgrim says. So does foolishness, replies the monk beside him. Fair again. The road continues through bare orchards and frost-covered fields where crows hop between rows of sleeping earth. Smoke rises from distant cottages preparing morning fires. Somewhere a dog barks once and then decides the effort was unnecessary. The medieval world feels calmer now. Not because it has become kinder. The cold still bites. People still age. Mirrors still reveal unwelcome truths. But after wandering through its halls and roads long enough, you begin understanding the tenderness hidden beneath all the strange rituals of appearance. A woman smoothing ribbon into a daughter's hair before church. A knight trimming his beard carefully before seeing someone he loves. A widow preserving an old painted portrait long after beauty itself has faded from memory. Tiny acts of care repeated against the darkness. You reach the hill beneath the keep near midday. Snowmelt drips steadily from the stone walls while banners stir lazily overhead in the weak wind. Travellers part ways here, each continuing toward different roads and obligations. Quiet farewells pass between them. A shared crust of bread. A promise to pray for safe journeys. A joke about surviving another medieval winter without losing too many toes. Then slowly, everyone disappears into separate paths beneath the pale sky. You remain for a moment beside the road, watching mist drift across the valley below. The world stretches outward in muted winter colours, brown fields, silver rivers, dark forests, smoke-grey villages scattered beneath enormous clouds. Somewhere far away, bells continue marking the hours exactly as they have for centuries. And here at the edge of the journey, the strange beauty standards of medieval Europe finally settle into something simpler. People feared ugliness partly because life itself could be so hard. They admired pale skin because labour broke bodies. They prized healthy teeth because illness stole them early. They glorified youth because age arrived swiftly. They covered hair, painted faces, perfumed clothing, trimmed beards, polished mirrors, and whispered remedies beside candlelight because human beings have always longed to feel valued before time carries them away. No one can quite agree whether beauty truly changes across centuries. Perhaps only the costumes do. The wind softens around the keep walls while afternoon light dims slowly toward evening once more. Fires begin appearing in distant cottage windows across the valley. You find shelter at last inside a small gatehouse chamber warmed by a modest hearth. The room is narrow but peaceful. Straw covers the floor. A single beeswax candle burns beside the wall while snowmelt taps gently outside the shutters. You sit quietly beside the fire. The long road finally catching up with you. The warmth loosens your tired muscles. Smoke drifts softly upward through the rafters. Somewhere below, stable horses stamp and snort in their stalls while guards murmur beside the gate. The candlelight flickers across the rough stone walls, and slowly, very slowly, the medieval world begins fading into softness. The manor feasts, the monastery bells, the muddy roads and drifting incense, the silver mirrors clouded with breath, the noblewomen glowing pale beside fires, the villagers laughing in smoky taverns, the pilgrims crossing frozen fields beneath winter stars, all of it settling now like snow over old tracks. The fire crackles gently. Outside, darkness gathers across the countryside with quiet, patient certainty. Inside, the room grows warmer and dimmer and still, and as your eyes begin to close beside the dying firelight, the strange, beautiful medieval world finally loosens its grip and lets you rest. Sleep comes softly here, like distant bells fading through mist, like candlelight shrinking slowly into amber. like winter wind moving gently beyond thick stone walls while the night holds everything safely in silence.